Today we address a fundamental question of justice. Can colonizers claim innocence under the pretense that the nations they invaded did not exist? Can the waging of war, when used as a tool of systemic oppression, be excused as lawful? The answer is unequivocal: no. The assertion that colonizers could not have broken the laws of a country that did not exist is a deliberate distortion of history and law. Indigenous nations across the world had well-established governance, legal traditions, and diplomatic relations long before European colonization. The Royal Proclamation of 1763 explicitly recognized indigenous land rights, affirming that indigenous nations held sovereignty over their territories unless ceded through treaties. This recognition by colonial authorities themselves contradicts the claim that these nations lacked legal existence. Furthermore, the Calder versus Attorney General of British Columbia case in 1973 established that Aboriginal title existed before colonization and was not simply derived from colonial law. This ruling dismantled the colonial narrative that indigenous nations lacked legal standing, proving that their sovereignty was unlawfully disregarded. The argument that waging war is not a crime ignores the reality that colonial wars were not conventional conflicts between equal parties, but rather systematic campaigns of dispossession, forced displacement, and cultural eradication. The doctrine of discovery, used by European powers, falsely justified the seizure of indigenous lands under the guise of legal expansion. This doctrine was nothing more than a fabricated legal excuse to dispossess entire civilizations. Historical examples illustrate the brutality of colonial warfare. The Belgian Congo from 1885 to 1908 is a stark example. King Leopold II's regime forced laborers to meet rubber quotas, holding their families hostage and punishing those who failed to comply. Soldiers were ordered to cut off the hands of those who resisted, demonstrating how colonial wars often involved atrocities disguised as lawful governance. The British Empire's Boer concentration camps from 1899 to 1902 provide another grim illustration. Over 27,000 civilians, mostly women and children, died in overcrowded camps with minimal food and rampant disease, showing how colonial warfare often targeted civilians. The Amritsar Massacre of 1919 British forces opened fire on peaceful protesters in India, killing between 379 and 1,000 people in just 10 minutes. This event exemplifies how colonial powers used military force to suppress resistance, often disregarding basic human rights. The Palestinian struggle against settler colonialism mirrors the historical injustices faced by indigenous nations worldwide. The Nakba of 1948, which led to the displacement of over 700,000 Palestinians, reflects the forced removals of indigenous peoples in North America. The doctrine of discovery, which justified European colonization, finds echoes in Zionist narratives that frame Palestinian land as empty or underutilized before Jewish settlement. Palestinian scholars have drawn connections between their struggle and indigenous resistance worldwide. Farah Kutainer notes that settler colonial states like the US and Israel are built on the erasure of native populations, rewriting legal systems to justify land theft. Similarly, Ahmad Amara and Yara Hawari argue that indigeneity has become central to Palestinian political mobilization, emphasizing the collective nature of decolonization. Colonialism was not a lawful expansion, it was a calculated system of exploitation, justified through manipulated legal frameworks. The claim that colonizers could not have broken laws because the nations they invaded did not exist is a legal fiction designed to absolve historical crimes. The argument that waging war is not a crime ignores the fact that colonial wars were often instruments of systemic destruction rather than traditional warfare. Justice demands that we recognize these historical injustices, hold colonial systems accountable, and ensure that such narratives are not used to excuse oppression in the present. The court must acknowledge that colonial warfare was not merely a historical inevitability, it was a deliberate act of aggression, and its consequences continue to shape the world today.